All right, so I got a good question on here, and I thought I'd address it. How do you save up to buy one of these outstanding horns? That's a great question. I answered it on the video and just said, well, spend 20 years getting a great job that allows you to afford pretty much whatever you want. But that's not much of an answer, right? So I guess it's a valid question. So, if you're a young student, young kid, I guess you're kind of to some degree constrained by what your parents can do for you and what they're able to afford. But there's always that good old adage of, get something to get you going. I don't know. This is a tough question because it really depends on where you're coming from. I'm a grown up, I'm a 51-year-old man. So it is actually true that I have a great paying engineering role and, I can afford all kinds of crazy things like this. However, if I couldn't, and to some degree, what I've done anyway, just because I'm not really a huge hoarder just yet, is I've sold things to acquire things. I can remember back when I was a kid, right? I'll start with this story. So here's the way you may not want to do it, but it's a possibility. This is what I did. When I was first starting out, and this wasn't trumpet, but this was something really expensive that I wanted that I had no money for. I was about probably 18, I think, was when you can legitimately apply for a credit card. Probably still true today. I know for loans, that's what it's minimum 18, even with a cosigner. So anyway, I went to a local music shop and I wanted a keyboard that had sequencing built into it. It was like $1,200. And, back in the 80s, I didn't have $1,200 just sitting in the bank somewhere. I worked, just basic jobs, whatever. So what I did, and, again, this is either good or bad, but I was very driven and motivated and had no other options. My parents didn't want to shell out the money for that. So I opened a credit card because I was a college student. And as you know, if you're a college student, they'll give you lots of credit to hang yourself by. And then I bought it. So I charged my very first large purchase. I ended up paying it back over, obviously, a period of time, but I paid way more than it was selling for because I paid interest for sure. I didn't just pay the credit card bill off the next month. But nevertheless, I got what I wanted. So I made the decision to incur further debt by doing that, but I got what I wanted. So fast forward to today, I don't really need credit cards too often other than for huge purchases. Like if I'm going to buy, well, I use it a lot for, this isn't financial advice. I'm just telling you how I do things. I don't really use credit very often. But in any event, I sell gear to buy gear. So, in today's world, you can do an awful lot of accumulating as well as taking all those things and, combining their sale toward a single purchase. So, for example, if you want to buy, let's say, a $2,500 trumpet, that's a pro level horn, but it's not insane, but it's certainly not cheap, right? So if you really want to buy that thing, maybe it means you need to make some different sacrifices of some other things in order to sell off the things that you don't use or don't need or would, abandon in place of this new instrument that you want to buy. So that's actually what I started doing. I use the model of like, hey, if I want another horn, I have to decide that I don't want one that I already have in order to fund the next purchase. So I, in some cases, sold multiple horns. Like the first custom horn I purchased was $3,400. And in order to do that, I had to sell every horn I had. Not really, but to justify it in my mind. And it still works by way of a methodology to acquire funding if you don't have it, or to justify a purchase that you don't need by getting rid of the other things that you don't need in order to support that purchase and justify and validate it. So that's what I did. I had a Yamaha Xeno horn and I had a couple of Kahn horns and I sold them all. And then I purchased this one custom horn. And I had that one horn for a long time, probably 2 or 3 years before I got back into like, well, I'm going to buy this and try that and try this. And along the way, like currently I love Schilke horns, and you've seen those horns on this channel before, but I have a tendency not to play them so much anymore. And I'm very much wrestling with maybe I should just get rid of them, because the two horns that I have are worth upwards of $5,000 together. So that's a lot of purchasing power towards something else, or to put into savings to hold on for something else, like that's not music related. Invest in some way for my kids, or maybe put a new deck on the back of my house for my wife. There's a lot of things I could do with that in lieu of just having those horns. But I think the real takeaway is people will always find a way to get what they want if they're motivated and driven enough. And unfortunately, sometimes that takes a lot of, effort, or doing things maybe you don't really want to do, like working an extra job or picking up after hours, or whatever that may be. But, you got to remember to take things in context. Like I said, I'm 51. So if you're some 30-year-old watching this, maybe you don't make the kind of money that I make, and you can't do what I can do, and that's totally fine. It doesn't mean anything negative. It just means you may have to do some more creative things than I do, because I've spent a lot of time in my technical career getting to this point where I can just afford stuff like this. So I don't say it with impunity or with disrespect, that a few $1,000 to me is really not that big of a deal. I don't mean that to make other people feel like, oh, this guy is just awful. Why would he say that? It's just where I am in life. Just like somebody can walk into a car dealership and buy a $180,000 car. I can't do that. I'm not going to hold it against them because they were successful and that's where they are in their life right now, and I'm not there. That's, it's just different. We got to solve our problems. But if you kind of constrain it down in to what the actual issue is, I think, we can all do with an awful lot less than we have. And if I had to pick one horn that I had to have and get rid of everything else, I could absolutely do that. I'm just a spoiled brat right now and don't have to do that, so I'm not gonna. But at the same time, I do feel a bit of a responsibility around the fact that I have a good amount of money invested in my recording, in my studio, and things like that. And quite frankly, the music thing, while I love doing it, it really, until you reach levels that I'm certain I'll never reach, and I don't mean that pessimistically, I just mean, it's not something that I'm going to reach by way of my career in music. You really don't make that much money. Like I've said it before, and I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but just to justify it. So I've probably made about $45,000 or $50,000 in music since 2018. And that's not very much money. I mean, it really isn't. It's not a sustainable amount of money, and it's certainly not consistent. That really, I think this year, I haven't done my taxes yet, so I don't know, and I haven't gotten all my 1099 Rs yet. But I'm probably going to have to put up another loss this year, because I've just not made that much money on music. I don't know if it's something I'm doing wrong, or, I've been on a whole bunch of Spotify playlists. I have, every week I get a report from Apple Music that, shows 2,000-3,000 streams a week. I mean, I'm doing pretty good on these platforms by way of the numbers, but the payouts are they're nothing. They're really small. I mean, these fractions of a penny are you got to have hundreds of millions of streams for that to matter. And I'm not exaggerating that. That's really what it means. So anyway, to summarize this whole thing, I guess just be creative and go out there. And if you really want a horn or something special or something, whatever, just, kind of give yourself a goal and shoot for it. And one of the hardest lessons to learn, and these are things I'm trying to teach my kids too, is that everything takes time. Unfortunately, not all of us can just snap our fingers and magically everything happens. Sometimes you got to work real hard, and that means you got to wait until you can actually get what you want. But in the end, the spoils of that kind of an effort are really rewarding, because you've truly earned and really waited for something you wanted for a while. And then, the reward is so sweet and so wonderful. So, happy hunting out there for your new horns. But the other thing to keep in mind is there's always deals, right? Everybody's Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Green Thursday, come by it on Friday. There's all kinds of great specials that are always out there for us to take advantage of. And, I've had to wait for certain things, like a lot of the plugins that I use for my recording studio, they're very expensive, right? Unless you buy them on these special deals, but that means you got to wait. So even those of us that have the money to just spend sometimes have to wait, because it's the most business-oriented way to acquire new things, if you want to be aware of that kind of stuff when you're making purchases and not just throwing money all over the place. Anyway, I don't know if that helped anybody, but I ramble on quite a bit here. So thanks.